Hi there, I'm Allison from Boomerang Pilates and the Move Smart Teacher Training Program. And today we're going to talk about hip extension, but a very small and boundaried and controlled hip extension. So this is going to be a mini lunge class. So you'll need a half dome or a cushion, something soft under your knee, and a yoga strap or a belt or a scarf, something that doesn't stretch. And we're going to start with a very boundaried lunge. So begin with your right knee on your half dome or your cushion or whatever you're going to use, and your left leg forward, and feel for what happens with your hips. You may find that your left hip bone is higher than your right. Slide your left hip down and then slide it back up again. We're going to do that a few times, and you can feel for the difference between what's happening in your pelvis in terms of your lift this way, but also what's happening in terms of a shift left to right. So if you put your hand on your right hip, feel for as the left hip comes up, this line straightens out. As your left hip comes down, usually your right leg ends up on a bit of an angle. So we're going to look to try and find a happy medium between those things, where you feel like you have a little bit of control, a little bit of effort in the side of your right hip, and potentially a little bit of ab turn on as you help to sustain and stabilize your torso so that you have a reasonably level hip and a reasonably level leg. So for some people, just that is going to feel like, okay, well, now I have some sensation in the front of my right hip and that's enough, in which case you can just hang out here. Otherwise, we're going to add our little bit of forward motion, not momentum. So you're going to hold your position, scooch your left foot a little bit further forward, and you're going to do a tiny little tailbone curl. Not a great big one, but just a little tiny curl. And again, for some people, that's the stopping point. It feels like that creates enough opening in the front of the right hip. Otherwise, bring your pelvis forward, let your head, your shoulders, and your neck travel with you, so you don't want to end up here. So it's a very small movement, and most people are going to stop somewhere in this kind of position. I can go into a great big lunge, but it's not really changing the angle specifically at the front of my hip. It's doing kind of a whole body shape, but it's not coming into this specific opening at the front of the hip without moving anything else. So this is an interesting thing to alternate your really big lunges with. Come on down from there and do the same thing on the other side. Left knee goes onto the half dome or the cushion, and then slide your right hip up and down and feel for what happens on the left side of your pelvis. So you may feel that you get some sliding of the left hip out, or you can see the angle of your leg changing. It's usually quite different from one side to the other. So see if you can get yourself into a nice level line from hip bone to hip bone and a reasonably stable left hip. So you may find there's some effort there. You may find there's a little effort in your torso. Little tiny tailbone curl, scooch your right foot forward a little bit, and then come into your very boundaried, very slight position, which ideally is going to give you a stretch sensation in the front of your left hip. And we're going to hang out there for a couple of breaths. I like to alternate stretch, effort, and release. So we're going to do a little bit of each of those things as we go through the next little while together. Come on off there. Come down to the floor. You're going to grab your yoga strap. Now you might want to use your half dome behind your head. And you're going to lie down. And we're going to do an Iliacus stretch. The Iliacus is one of the parts of the musculature that connects your pelvis to your leg. So right foot goes up in the strap. Left leg down heavy on the floor. You don't need to have your leg drawing all the way back towards you. You may have a little bit of pelvis rolling up off the floor. We're not fussing too much about keeping a completely neutral pelvis here, but I would like you to feel like your back is relaxed and the base of your ribs can settle down into the floor. From here, you're going to slide. This is not the Iliacus stretch, this is the lateral hip stretch. So you're going to keep your right hip down heavy on the floor and slide your right leg over towards the midline, over only as far as you can go, keeping that right hip planted. Come on over, and then use the muscles in your right hip to pull back up to center. And slide over to the side and pull back up to center. 2 more. And pull. Last one. Come on back up to center. And now turn your leg out right from the very top of the leg in the hip socket. So you'll end up with your right toes and your right knee pointing further to the right, but don't generate it from your foot. Generate it from spinning your whole thigh bone around. And then again, cross your leg gently over towards the left. You will not probably be able to go as far, and so you just respect the difference in the range. Cross the leg over to the left and slide back up to center. Cross the leg over again. Come back up and we'll do 2 more. Cross to the left and slide back up, keeping in mind that you don't need to do a big range to have a lot of effect for this motion. And then you can change over, same thing, other side. Right leg down on the floor. The height at which you hold this leg might be different because we are not the same from side to side. Your leg stays parallel. Drop the hip down on the floor, the left hip, and cross your leg over towards the midline as far as is practical and comfortable, or comfortably uncomfortable, and slide back up. And we'll do 4 more. Reach. Use the lateral hip muscles to pull the leg back up to center. Slide over to the right. Pull back up. And again. And last one. Come back up to center. Externally rotate the leg so you turn right from the leg in the hip socket. Cross the leg over towards the right and slide back up to center. Cross the leg 2 and back up to center. 3 and back up to center. 4. You may find that your range is increasing a little bit as you go. Here's the last one. Make sure you're still turned out. Your leg might sneakily want to have gone back to center. And then bring your leg out of the strap. And come on back up onto your half dome. So now we're going to add a rotation to our lunge. So starting with your right knee on the half dome. See if you feel like you are perhaps a little bit more centered right off the bat this time. Do your little tiny tailbone curl. Slide your pelvis forward only as much as feels appropriate and sensible for you. Fold your hands over your shoulders. And now you're going to turn to the left. So we're rotating away from the stretching hip. Come on back to center. Twist to the left, keeping your pelvis square to the front. And come back to center. So that might mean you don't go very far. The thing about changing your alignment points is that you then have to also change your expectation about how far you're going to go. Come back to center, and then we're going to change sides. Come on down from there. Left knee goes onto the half dome or the cushion or the bolster or whatever it is that you're using. Play around with that hip. See if you can feel a difference from the way you were set up the first time. Might be easier, right, to get into a centered position. And then fold your hands over your shoulders, little tiny tailbone curl. Edge your pelvis forward. If you feel this happening more in your back than your front, let yourself do a little bit of a tip forward, right? We want to avoid really using your back and your spine and twist to the right to compensate for tension in the front chain. And again, sometimes that means this is a smaller motion than you feel like you think it should be, and that's okay. Twist and come back to center. 2 more. And last one. Come on back to center. So hopefully that felt a little bit easier this time. Come on off there. Now we're going to do the iliacus stretch. So now you're going to use your half dome. It's going to go under your pelvis with the flat side up. And you're going to bring your right leg in towards your chest. And you're going to just wrap your hands around your knee and let your back settle towards the floor. If you know you're tight in your neck and shoulders and you feel like you're kind of lying like this with your head yanked back, you'll want to put something extra under your head, so a folded up towel or a small cushion. You're going to keep your pelvis super stable and your lower back draping down towards the floor and your right knee pulled in towards you as you bring your left leg down only as far as you can go without your pelvis tipping and your back pulling away from the floor. So you might find that's not as low as you think it might be, but you find your sweet spot, and we're going to hang out there for a moment and find a sense of control and see if maybe as you hang out there you can gradually let the leg come a little bit lower. And we're looking at the muscle that really connects from the pelvis to the leg bone, which is why your pelvis needs to not move. You want to keep that little bit of tailbone curl intact. And then slowly, using your quad muscle and using your hip flexors, pull your leg straight back up. And then slide down again, keeping that same sense of control to the pelvis. And now you're going to slide your leg in and out like a windshield wiper. Out to the left and into the midline. And out to the left. Trying to keep your pelvis still so you're not rocking from side to side on your butt. Your bum cheeks should be staying evenly weighted on your half dome or your cushion or whatever it is that you're using as your surface. And then come on back up to center. Slide. Okay, now extend your right leg, holding on to the left. Slide that leg down only as far as you can go, maintaining the connection into the core and into the pelvis and the back being nice and stable. Find your sweet spot. Really feel for where is the moment you start to tip. Hold for a breath and slide back up. Reach down and then start to move your leg further out to the side and back into center. And out to the side and back into center. Couple more times, really being aware that the range might be different on one side than it is on the other. Totally okay and to be expected. One more. Slide back in, come to neutral. Bring your leg all the way back in. Now we're going to go for the same thing in external rotation. Now extend your right leg. Turn out right from the top of the back. Now extend the right leg. Turn out from the top of the back of the leg. Slide the leg down. Find your hold, nice and stable through the torso, through the pelvis. Couple of breaths. Find whatever is the appropriate height for you, and it does not need to be all the way down at the floor. It might be, but it might not be. It's not for me. I feel I can get down there, but I start to rock. Slide your leg up. Slide your leg down. Now we're going to go for the out to the side and back to center. A couple of those. Playing with your range, finding different angles and different shapes that work within this motion to get into lots of different nooks and crannies of your hip. Come on back into center, bring your leg all the way back in. And slide off your half dome. And now we're going to go for a lunge in an external rotation. So come on back to your half dome. Step your left foot forward, right foot back. But this time, you're going to cross your right foot back behind your left heel, or sort of in that direction, whatever is comfortable for you. and you'll usually feel your whole pelvis has shifted with you. So see if you can start to draw your left hip bone back towards your right heel and your right hip bone forward towards your left knee, so that we try and stack things up. Remembering that one of the things that gets people a little bit distressed about alignment work sometimes is that it feels too rigid and too forced. So what we're looking for in this position is that you play with it. Approach it with curiosity. What happens when you do this? Stay in that comfortably uncomfortable zone where you're just challenging a range, not where you feel strain or stress on your knee. So your right knee should not feel any torquing or stress. No stress in the left hip. So you get a little bit of support in the back of your left hip, but we're looking to just change up the angle in the hip, not to subject you to something horrible. So you get as close to that as you can. And then you do your little tailbone curl and you slide forward. And usually the range is pretty small here. You'll feel you start to shift as soon as you bring your pelvis into that little tailbone curl. So just play it, right? Let yourself explore what happens if you let your left hip come forward and then re-tailbone curl and draw it back and release. So that becomes kind of a chewing gum motion, right? Small motion done a bunch of times in order to generate, you know, a nice pliable stretchiness, as opposed to trying to beat your hip with a hammer. If it's comfortable to stay and hold in this position, that's good too. Come on over, same thing, other side. Left knee on the dome or the cushion or whatever you're using. Right leg forward. Feel for a reasonably upright left thigh bone. Reasonably level pelvis. Might be easier or harder to achieve on this side. A little bit of tailbone curl. Turn your left heel to be behind your left toes to be behind your right heel. Feel how that immediately changes all of your geometry, and then play in that range. This is much tighter for me on this side, much harder to organize. I feel way more core engagement in trying to maintain the position, but I'm staying in a zone, in a range where it feels like a good exploration and where nothing is straining. It's working. This doesn't feel much like a stretch to me. This feels more like work. Everything is on to try and hold these positions as I open up very gently into my little tiny boundary lunge. So for perspective, you can keep lunging or you can pause for a second if you want. If I keep myself parallel, keeping in mind this is the third pass, so my range has increased as we go. If I just go for a big wide open lunge, I can come all the way down to here. If I go into a boundaried lunge, where I'm using my alignment markers, I can go to about here. If I go into external rotation on this side, and I have everything set up, I can go to about here. This is the full extent of my external rotation, or of my hip extension, when my thigh bone is externally rotated, which really, because I'm very internally rotated through my thigh bones, as most of us are, is really just bringing me closer to neutral, right? I don't have a lot of hip extension. So if I were to go into a big hip extension position here, I'd be pulling into my back. So I'm just trying to stay mindful of all of that. All right, come on off there. Come down onto your back. Half dome behind your head. Now we're going to work your hip flexors a little bit. So bend your left knee. Get your left bum cheek heavy down into the floor and keep your left foot nice and light. Turn your right leg out, right again from the hip, and slowly, without letting anything else move or twist, slowly bring your leg up off the floor. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold at whatever height you can get to without moving anything else. And that really might only be a couple of inches off the floor. And then slide back down. Inhale to stay. Exhale, slide up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale to hold. And exhale all the way back down. And one more time. Lift. 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so much work in my thigh and my hip flexor, you're doing it right. Slide back down. This should be fairly challenging. If it's not, check and make sure you're not letting your left hip lift, you're not pushing with your left foot, or letting your butt curl, right? If you feel like you're rolling down into the floor, that's going to make it much easier. Bend your right knee, left leg down on the floor, get yourself all nicely level, waist even from both side to side. Bum cheeks evenly planted in your imaginary Caribbean beach. Turn your leg out right from the hip, and then slowly lift that left leg. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Keeping all your bits and pieces in place. Hold at the top to breathe in, and slide back down. 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale at the bottom. Exhale to lift. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold at the top. Think quiet thoughts to yourself. Slide back down. 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, last one. Lift. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold at the top and slide back down. 2, 3, 4, 5. Come up from there. We're going to do one more lunge, coming right back to where we started. So right knee on the half dome. Trying to keep it so you can still see my head. Left leg forward. And just check. See how you feel. I feel much longer through my waist. I feel like my pelvis is much more stable, and my right leg is more easily straight up and down and upright compared to the way it was when we started. A little bit of a tailbone curl. Slide your pelvis forward. See if you feel like your range has increased. Can you take your leg a little farther than you could the first time? Hopefully you can. And then slide back on top of your half dome. Reach the right foot out. Toes wedged into the floor. Check in. So this is my less stable, level, even side. So I have to work at it a little bit more, but I feel like I don't have to work at it as hard as I did to begin with. Scooch your right foot forward, a little bit of a tailbone curl, and ease your pelvis forward, checking for, are you pulling into your chest? Are your shoulders tight? Is your neck tight? Can you let yourself soften a little bit as you come forward so that you really keep the base of your ribs stacked over top of your pelvis, and it's just your whole body moving forward relative to your leg in the hip socket. And then you can come back down from there. And one of the things, as I scooch a little closer to say goodbye, one of the things that I did in class the other day with this series is we did everything on the same side. So you can take this whole series and do it all on the right. And then if you do a plank or a down dog or a down dog plank combo, you will feel a huge difference from one side to the other. And then you go and you do the other side. So maybe I'll make a video with that later. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Pop them into the comments down below. And if you have any other ideas about awesome hip opening, ways of approaching hip opening that are a little untraditional, right? Not quite the great big motions that we're used to, then pop those in too, because it's great to build community around different kinds of movement. Take care, and we'll see you next time.